know it's Memorial Day weekend, so we do have the few and the chosen who are here. Maybe it's a bad thing. That means you haven't gone away for a little trip, but it's okay. Speaking of cool things to do, one of the coolest things I've done this year at least, and I did it twice, for Rachel's birthday in January, and then we liked it so much that we did it again in March for my birthday. And that is, we went to Vineyard Country in Temecula. Oh yeah, wow, okay. Oh, hey Tom, we actually saw you while we were there that one trip. No joke, we're in Old Town Temecula, and we did see the breezes there. So, hey, this is real. You know, this story is real. And to kick it up a notch, the first time we went, well, both times, but in January, Rachel had done some research, and she found this newer company that literally takes you on an old World War II modeled motorcycle called a sidecar, and they transport you, they take you from a couple different vineyards in Temecula. All right, so I'll put up a picture, not the video, but we'll put the picture up right now. So there's us. All right, so this is real, this happened. So there we are in the sidecar. And I hadn't really been to Temecula that much before, driven through it, kind of all that kind of stuff. I'm not a huge, bougie wine connoisseur. And so it was all kind of new. And so before we got there, here's what I'm imagining. I'm imagining us on the motorcycle and just like lush green vines, like hanging down. We're on the motorcycle. We're not driving. We're sitting in the little compartment, but we're going down, and I'm just reaching out my hand for these luscious grapes, just ripping them off, and kind of like a Roman emperor back in the day, just lavishly putting the grapes in my mouth as the green vines slap me in the face as I go down. And it didn't hit me though. We're going in January. There's no grapes out in January. It's winter. It's cold. It's windy. And so we weren't able to drive down, and I wasn't able to grab the grapes and have the vines hit me in the face. And we get there, and I look out, and it just looks like a bunch of dead brown roots and stems. And I'm like, why do people go to a vineyard? All right? Now, to give you, not a taste, that takes on a new meaning of this, but here, a little video. This is literally a video of us going down on the motorcycle through the vineyard, and you'll notice everything just looks brown and dead. All right, there we go. So needless to say, I'm pretty disappointed. I'm like, man, what in the world? We spent hundreds of dollars for this. Come on, this is whatever. But what I learned that day, I was completely struck and surprised, and I had heard a little bit about this stuff before, but I got a full-on education of the insane science that goes into making wine. And what I didn't know was actually that the winter months, December, January, February, are actually, I would say arguably, but I'm pretty sure they're the most important months for making wine from grapes. And I had no idea about this. And so it's actually a good thing that it's winter, that it's cold. I don't know if it's good if it's windy or not. But that's when they go out and they cut off all the dead branches. And it's all because they're more concerned with higher quality than quantity. If you're familiar with what I'm talking about, this is what pruning is. And it's not even just for vineyards, it also will be true for rose bushes. But pruning, cutting off, is actually a really important thing, if not the most important thing for vineyards. Winter is a pivotal season if they want those rich, luxurious Roman Emperor grapes at the end. That's how you get there. And as I learned about this, and we went there twice, one of the things I left with a couple of bottles of wine, I will say that. Don't judge me. Jesus liked wine. I don't want any emails, you know what I mean? Anyways, I thought, what an insightful commentary on 21st century American life, and here's what I mean. I don't think we like pruning seasons in life. I don't think we like pruning. Particularly American culture, I think we like instant gratification. I think we prize shortcuts. And we like immediate fruit. We want things now. And I think, particularly for the younger generations, I'm a millennial, and even those below, Gen Z, I think we have a really, really hard time with struggle, with hardship, with sitting in seasons, in winter seasons, where there is pruning. Right? And it's because we're used to Siri, Amazon Prime, medicine, Google. We're in control of like whenever we want things and when we want them, how fast we want them. We just click on a button on our phone, and lo and behold, literally there's 1 day shipping for Amazon Prime. Like I ordered something yesterday, and I'm going to come home today, and I'm going to get it. And it's at my fingertips. But here's the question I want us to ask this morning. What if the best things in life come in the hardest seasons of life? What if the best things of life come in the hardest seasons of life? What if it's a pruning season that actually points us towards our only true source, our only vine, and that is when you will yield your best fruit? So I want us to think about. Now, beginning in the Old Testament, so you have the nation of Israel. They're kind of like the church in the Old Testament, if you will. And it's really striking. I mean, this whole series, I think you probably picked up, there's themes that Jesus is working with. And one of the themes in the Old Testament was that Israel was called a vine. Israel, God's people, were identified, metaphorically speaking, as a vineyard. And of course, God, Yahweh, was considered, the person who was in charge of that. One of the problems that we run into, though, in the Old Testament is that Israel was called to be really fruitful. They were supposed to be a vine that put out really fruitful, impactful, positively influential lives. But the problem is they didn't do it. They actually put out some really bad, like rotten fruit. So let me just give you one passage about this. Don't worry about turning there. Isaiah chapter 5. This just kind of gives you a hint, a feeling of this metaphor. Isaiah chapter 5, we'll put on the screen. Speaking of God, here's what we read. My loved one had a vineyard on a fertile hillside. He, referring to God, looked for a crop of good grapes, but it yielded only bad fruit. Now I will tell you what I'm going to do with my vineyard. I will make it a wasteland, neither pruned nor cultivated, and briars and thorns will grow there. And here it is. The vineyard of the Lord Almighty is the nation of Israel, and the people of Judah are the vines he delighted in. And here's bad news. He looked for justice, but he saw bloodshed. And he looked for righteousness, but he heard cries of distress. Embedded in first century ancient Jewish culture was they saw themselves as Yahweh, as God's vineyard. The problem, though, again, was that they produced bad fruit, so to speak. They weren't living up to the fruitful life that God had placed upon them. So much so that most of the time in the Old Testament, when you read of this metaphor, it's usually always in a context of judgment. So usually when God calls Israel his vineyard, he's usually got like warnings and challenges and bad things to say about them. It's usually not a good thing. And that's because they didn't produce the fruit that Yahweh was looking for. Now, that's the context, that's the background. As any good Sunday school teacher will tell you, it always goes back to Jesus. All right? So now we're going to get to the Jesus part. John chapter 15, if you have a Bible, turn there. If you need one, we got these, page 737. These are free Bibles. You can take this home if you don't have one. Page 737 in these. John 15, starting verse 1. This is the last time we're in the book of John for a while. We're ending this series. We've looked at these sayings, these specific sayings that Jesus gives. And each one reveals more of his identity. And so here is the last one that we're looking at. And Jesus, like right away, gives us the statement. He says, I am the true vine, and my Father is the gardener. We're just going to stop right there. Jesus' main point of this passage, and he doesn't waste any time, he comes out right away and he says, hey, I'm the true vine. And what he means is this: Israel, you guys were supposed to be the vine. You were supposed to be this vineyard that produced fruit, but you didn't, you couldn't. And so I'm going to be what you should have, but couldn't. And Jesus is like the ultimate, like the true vine, right? I mean, if you want to get kind of whatever here, Jesus is putting out like the organic produce from Whole Foods that costs way too much money. Like he's saying, I'm the real vine. Like you want good quality fruit, I'm going to give you the expensive stuff. And this is really good news. This is gospel. Gospel means good news. Because the reality is that every single one of us in here, we have a little Israel in us. Which means we all got some bad fruit in here. You may not want to admit it. Some of you are nodding your head like, yeah, I got some bad fruit. That's good. One of the worst things I hate is, true or false, is an avocado a fruit? Anybody willing to say false? Oh, come on. You know your stuff. He's got a seed. Yes, avocado is a fruit. What I hate is an avocado can look great on the outside, green, ripe, and then, you know what I hate? You open it up, it's got all those brown spots. Yeah. Some of us are like that. We're some rotten avocados. Here's the deal. Jesus comes on the scene here. And he's like, I'm going to do what you cannot be. I'm going to do what you cannot do despite your best efforts. Matt Chandler, pastor in Dallas, he says, Jesus kind of as this true vine, it's like Jesus enters into our banner of failure and he's like, I got you. I got you. Hashtag blessed. I don't know if that's still a thing or not. So this is good news. If we stopped right here in the passage, we're like, okay, cool. So we got some bad fruit. Jesus is the true vine. He's going to give us the good fruit that we should have. Great. Let's call it a day. This is great news. This is encouraging. But Jesus doesn't stop. And now he gets to the tough part. Because now he's going to talk about pruning and cutting off. And we don't like to talk about that. But Jesus goes there. Verse 2. He cuts off every branch in me that bears no fruit, while every branch that does bear fruit, he prunes, so that it'll be even more fruitful. You are already clean because of the word I've spoken to you. Real quick, the word clean there, it means morally pure, but it also, they use it in the agricultural world, and it means to prune. So what Jesus is saying here, he's like, hey, I'm pruning you, like I'm making you clean Like, I'm going to bring good fruit out of your lives if you just believe in me, if you just accept my words of life, my redemption story. He continues, verse 4. Remain in me, or abide, or stay connected, as I also remain in you. No branch can bear fruit by itself. It must remain in the vine. Neither can you bear fruit unless you remain in me. I am the vine. And here's an interesting one. He identifies us. He says, you are the branches. If you remain in me and I in you, you will bear much fruit. Apart from me, you can do nothing. If you do not remain in me, you are like a branch that's thrown away and withers, and such branches are picked up and thrown into the fire and burned. That'll preach. If you remain in me, and my words remain in you, ask whatever you wish, and it'll be done for you. And real quick on that, because I think some people misinterpret this phrase of Jesus. That doesn't mean, by the way, if you ask Jesus, if you ask God, hey, God, can you just increase my Bitcoin stock 500%? Woo, okay, someone's got some Bitcoin investment over there. Bitcoin, Dogecoin, yeah, you guys all know what I'm talking about. What Jesus isn't saying here, if you just pray that, oh God, I want you to increase my investments, I'll do it. No, that's not what he's getting at here. I think what he's getting at is, if your heart, if your desires are in line with God's will and God's heart, God's agenda, oh, you better believe he'll give you that. Isn't it interesting that prayer often reveals, usually I think, reflections of our true desires? God's not a genie. He's not a Coke vending machine. You press a button and you get something. We're still laughing about Bitcoin. Okay. I've heard some crazy stories the last couple months, people who've made millions of dollars in cryptocurrency. But anyways, I'll stop there. I have some theories on that. Anyways, okay, verse 8. This is to my Father's glory that you bear much fruit, showing yourselves to be my disciples. Verse 11, I think this is an important ending. I've told you this. Jesus said, here's why I'm telling you this, so that my joy may be in you and that your joy may be complete. Now, I don't know much about gardening. I'm not into gardening. My wife and I are so bad. I'm sorry to include you in that, baby. Are so bad. We just buy succulents at our house because, you can't really kill succulents. If you do, you got other problems. You know what I'm saying? So we just buy succulents, or we do the whole fake plant thing. I'm not sure. Well, if Home Depot watches this, I'm so sorry. Here's a secret, guys. If you buy your plants at Home Depot and you keep the receipt, you have 12 months. Oh, Peggy Bumpus, you're give me more of that. Yeah, and if they die, you just return them and you get your money back. It's absolutely phenomenal. So I've walked into Home Depot before with just hands full of plants, they're all dead, and I get my money back. But anyways, all you really need to know, joking aside about vines and how to prune them, is that pruning, all it is, if pruning is not your thing, is just strategically cutting off branches. And the whole point about pruning is that you have to cut off the branch so that it actually ends up producing really good fruit. And so in a vineyard, if there's branches that are growing inward, or if they're growing in a tangled mess, they cut them. Because they want the branches to go outward towards the light. That's how they produce really high quality grapes. Vines need help growing in the right direction and to the right ends. A really good gardener is someone who, what's the name for someone who oversees a vineyard? A vinter? Okay, I didn't know that. So if you're a vinter, pruning is so important, because the last thing that you want is for your vines, your branches, to waste energy, to waste water and nutrients and light on branches that aren't going to produce good fruit. It literally is a waste of energy. And so they prune them, they cut them, They cut off unproductive branches. They got the long term in mind, not the short term. N.T. Wright, my favorite theologian, in his commentary, he wrote this. He's talking about roses, but it also applies to vines. He says, you prune the rose to help it to be its true self. Left to themselves, they produce a lot of superfluous growth, which must be cut away if the vine is truly to be what it's capable of. You catch that? If the vine is to be truly what it's capable of, it has to be pruned. The other key component of this whole gardening thing, and this one's way more intuitive and natural, and we understand it, is that branches only grow if they stay attached to the vine. Right? I mean, we know this is obvious. If you cut something off, it no longer has supply to water, to nutrients, all that kind of stuff that makes a plant grow. So here's what Jesus is saying to kind of put all this together. It's pretty intuitive, but he's saying this: I'm the vine, you're the branches, and the whole point of a plant, the whole reason why a plant exists and a vine exists is to produce really good fruit, good grapes. And he says the way that we as humans, as followers of this Jesus, the way that we grow fruit, the way that we flourish, the way that you come alive is by staying attached to Jesus, who's your true vine. Hold on. You don't just stay attached, but you allow him to prune you. Where's the clapping now? I feel good, guys. I leave for vacation tomorrow. Come on, baby, let's go. Followers of Jesus, I want you to catch this. This will change our church. This will change our church. If we want to grow and we want to come alive and we want to be everything that God has for us, we have to stay connected to Jesus, the true vine, and let him cut off unproductive branches in our life. Let me ask you this. When are the times in your life that you've learned the most? When are the times in your life where you've been shaped and formed and your character's been refined? When have you become stronger? I'd be willing to guess that that's come during times of winters and seasons of pruning. We humans, we don't learn the easy way. God has to take us through winters. Honestly, for me, and I've shared this a little bit, pretty open with you guys, the past year, last 14 months, has been the most stressful, doubtful, and anxious year of my life. Without a question. Without a question. And God has a very unique sense of humor. This past week, I went away for a couple days, intentionally by myself, which as an extrovert really tested me. And I was up in the Santa Monica Mountains in Topanga. Just spent time reading, praying, reflecting. And the passage that God spoke to me this past week was John 15, 1-8. Because something that became and has become very evident to me is that I've been in a season of pruning, and I've hated it. But I wouldn't change it for the world. I brought up this journal with me. I'm not even usually a journal person. And 2 weeks ago, before I left for this, I'm sitting with my therapist. And my therapist, this dude's a boss, literally. Retired lead pastor, well-known. He created the largest Christian counseling center in Orange County. Years of experience. And so he sat with me the past year, and he knows all my pain. He knows all my frustrations. And our last session, he's sitting down in this big chair, leans back. Looks like he's on vacation. I'm like, dude, this is painful, bro. And he said, Mark, and he said this kind of sharply, almost like challenged me. He said, you need to do two things. You need to spend a couple hours getting away by yourself with the journal. And you need to answer these two questions. First, what have you learned about God in this season of your life? And two, what have you learned about yourself in this season of your life? And so, hey, here I am in Topanga, Monday through Thursday. And I answered those questions in this. And I'm so thankful. Because the thing that I walked away with was that God is a master gardener. And he was cutting off some pretty unproductive branches in my life. Insecurity, people-pleasing, lack of faith, lack of trust. And it was almost like God was saying, Mark, you're not going to grow. You're not going to produce fruit in your life unless you allow me to prune you. It's going to hurt. And in the short term, it's going to look bad. But God is like, I got the long term in mind. And the other thing I realized, I'm never going to be who God has created me to be unless I go through that process. You have to go through pain. You have to go through refining. You have to allow God to cut off branches in your life, whatever those are, and those are all different things for all of us. But if you want to be who God has made you to be, and you want to become strong and refined and shaped and formed, you have to let the master gardener prune you. And let me be clear on this. God doesn't like suffering. It's not like God is looking at us and just wanting to intentionally mess with us. That's not what I'm saying. We will experience pain in this world because we live in a broken world filled with sin and brokenness and evil and suffering and tragedy. But here's the reality. At some point in your life, and in my 20s, I didn't get this. I was so naive, so ignorant. But it is inevitable that you will go through seasons of life where a knife, so to speak, cuts off a branch. It's inevitable. That's bad news. Here's the good news. If you're remaining, if you're staying connected, if you're staying intimately attached to Jesus, these bad situations, as Tim Keller says, they won't make you hard. They'll make you soft. They won't make you stupid. They'll make you wise. They won't make you less human. They'll make you more human. The bad things will actually turn you into something great. But if you aren't connected to Jesus, when the pruning happens, you will turn into a hopeless person, an angry person, a negative person, a selfish person. You'll end up bearing no fruit. And as Jesus says in this passage, you'll just become that dead, dry wood that the youth group will use for a bonfire at Huntington Beach or something. See, the good thing about pruning the branch is that you're forced to get life from the vine. What a good thing. C.S. Lewis, kind of a giant of the faith in the 20th century, he used to be an atheist. He's got a crazy story. You should read it. He writes this, and I think this is so brilliant, so insightful. Here's what he says about this topic. That is why we must not be surprised if we are in for a rough time. When a man turns to Christ and seems to be getting on pretty well, in the sense that some of his bad habits are now corrected, He often feels that it would now be natural if things went fairly smoothly. When troubles come along, illness, money troubles, new kind of temptations, he's disappointed. Haven't we been there? You're like, God, why this again? These things he feels might have been necessary to rouse him and make him repent in his battle days, but why now? Because God is forcing him on or up to a higher level, putting him into situations where he'll have to be very much braver or more patient or more loving than he ever dreamed of being before. It seems to us all unnecessary, but that is because we have not yet had the slightest notion of the tremendous thing that he means to make of us. Here's my question for you this morning. I got a couple. Are you allowing God to prune you? Are you allowing him to prune you? To cut off the branches that aren't healthy and that are actually keeping you from growing and becoming all that you should be, which is this beautiful, flourishing human being that's full of amazing, high-quality fruit. And is the pruning, is it leading you back to the vine or to be cut off? Remember, what's so important about this passage is what Jesus says in verse 11. Why does he do this? He does it so that your joy may be made complete. Joy. Joy. Happiness is fickle. Happiness changes every morning. It depends upon how your hair turns out that day, how your latte's made, whether your Bitcoin has gone up or down. But you want to know what joy is? Joy is mature. Joy is stronger. Joy is tested. Joy remains in the thick of things. Joy is strengthened in the pruning. Joy doesn't run. Joy's sibling is commitment. I think sometimes I wonder if our younger generations don't experience true joy because they have a lack of commitment. You don't know joy unless you've been pruned and you come out the other side. See, the Bible is this grand story of human beings, right? We start in a garden with tons of fruit. This metaphor is from Genesis to Revelation in the scriptures. And what happens? Adam and Eve, they're cut off in the garden from the fruit because they decide to do life their own way. Here's the good news this morning. Here's the gospel. The good news is that Jesus is the true vine who is actually cut off from God on the cross so that we wouldn't be cut off. And the fruitful lives that we long for, even in the midst of our failures and the chaos and the rotten avocados of our life, the good news is that Jesus is available to you and I, our true vine, by staying connected to him. The best way to live a fruitful life, like organic whole food stuff, is to stay connected to your gardener. Do you want a life that has influential, impactful fruit? Remain in Jesus. You know, another letter in the New Testament, Paul picks up the same metaphor. Hang with me real quick. This is a light bulb moment for me. The fruit of the Spirit. What's fruit? Do you want your life to be characterized by love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, gentleness, self-control? Hopefully I got them all. I think most of us do, right? We want that. Jesus is the key. It's not what you do. He's already done everything for you. He's just the vine, and he says, just stay connected to me. You don't need to change any of your external moral behavior. And I think a lot of us have grown up with the Christianity that says, oh, hey, all you got to do is say a prayer at the altar call, check off the box, say the prayer, and I'm in. I'm a Christian. right? And we turn Christianity into a hell insurance card. Let me tell you, you can call that Christianity if you want, but it's not following Jesus. Because following Jesus is every morning when you wake up, it's staying connected to, it's abiding, it's to your vine, the gardener, that's Jesus. And you have to stay connected to him if you want to bear fruit. And obviously the last thought on this is, okay, well, how do I do that, Mark? How do I stay connected? You don't need to go to the Santa Monica Mountains to do that. What it is every day when you wake up and you spend time in prayer. You don't just read the Bible, you reflect on it and you meditate on it. Let me ask you this, do you read the Bible or do you have the Bible read you? Have the Bible read you. Serve, be in a life group, talk to other people about your faith, worship, generosity. Some of you this morning, this was in our prayer time before the service, is just coming to me right now. Some of us, we want to stay abided and connected. Jesus, you need to let go and have some freedom during worship. Move a little bit. Yeah, maybe do some salsa or something. I don't even know what that means. Are you remaining in Jesus, your vine? Do you have an intimate, organic connection to him? That's what I want you to wrestle with. I'm going to invite the worship team back up. Go into a time of response. I want to read a passage over you. It's our passage this morning, but in the Message, which is a modern paraphrase. I just read a 300-page biography on the guy who translated this. And he retired and died in his 80s a couple years ago. His name's Eugene Peterson. And as I read this biography, what an image of a man who viewed pastoring, but just life in general, as staying connected to Jesus. Close your eyes. Let me just read this over you. Let this be your posture. Let it be your life. Here's how he translates John 15, 4-8. Live in me. Make your home in me, just as I do in you. In the same way that a branch can't bear grapes by itself, but only by being joined to the vine, you can't bear fruit unless you're joined with me. I am the vine, you are the branches. When you're joined with me and I with you, the relation intimate and organic, the harvest is sure to be abundant. Separated, you can't produce a thing. Where does this hit you? Is there good fruit in your life? Are you spending time with Jesus? Maybe you're going through a time of pruning. What is God pruning? What is he cutting off? Holy Spirit, speak to us, minister to us.